So, anyways, moving forward, so because she did not feel, or I did not feel accepted or validated, I finally ended up telling kids at that time my story. And a lot of them would say, I remember they used to say, "I'm so sorry that happened to you." I've heard that so much in my life. Like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you." And I never understood like why people would say that, because I'm like, it's not your fault. Like, you didn't do anything. And they'd be like, "No, I'm sorry because that's not normal." And like, they didn't know what else to say. They're like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you." And I never understood it, because I was like, I don't want you to apologize. I just want you to understand why I am the way that I am, and like why I'm so different from you. And that's where like the starting of me telling people my life story, so that way I could at least have the attempt of being accepted later on in life started. I would basically start to over explain myself and be like, "Oh, this is why you should give me a chance, because I've been through all of these things." Um, and now that I've gotten older, I think, you know, sharing your story is important, but I don't think that it should be something that you tell to somebody immediately, um, because at the end of the day, your story does not define you unless you let it. However, I think it's also important that you tell your story so that you can process and have closure and maybe help somebody else. And that's what I'm trying to do now. But whenever I went to college, I ended up basically like trauma dumping on people, which is like so humiliating and embarrassing looking back. But I'm like trying to have grace and compassion for that 18-year-old part of me, because I just wanted to be accepted so badly. And growing up from this age, I realized a lot of kids did not accept me because they never understood my story. But I mean, there's going to be people who don't want to accept you. And that's just something that you have to come to terms with, because the things that you have been through shouldn't be a reason as to why somebody accepts you, if that makes sense. Um, I don't know. So whenever I was a kid, I finally ended up, like I said, I finally ended up telling people what I had been through. And then finally, like, people were giving me validation and acceptance and compassion, which is something that I was like craving at that time. And I ended up going home, and I told one of my grandparents about the fact that I had told people about the things that I had been through. And one of my grandparents ended up getting very, very, very angry with me, and getting and chastising me and being like, "That's not your story to tell. I don't want people at this school knowing my business. I don't want them to know why we are different than everybody else." And basically told me that I was not allowed to share my story. And so, what this part of me was trying to explain is that a reason, as to why I ended up going into this more pick me behavior as I got older, one of the layers to that is trying to be like, "Hey, pick me, I deserve to be loved." But then, in conglomeration with that, over explaining my story so that way I can give good reason as to why I deserve to be loved, because from a very young age, I felt like I had to earn love. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I think a lot of people feel that way, and it's very alienating, for a child to go into a classroom whenever they are young and see all these other kids with their dads and their parents, and be told that they are different from the rest of them because their dad showed up so they get to eat a donut and this kid doesn't because they don't have a dad. Um, Now I'm like tearing up. So I ended up also realizing that that was a big reason as to why my throat always closes up whenever I try to speak my truth, or even whenever I'm like doing this podcast. Like, that is a big reason why my throat will close up and I'll feel like I'm gasping for air. Um, and so God really wanted me to use this platform to tell my story. and help other people. And that was another thing that my 8 to 10 year old self was explaining to me, is that this podcast was going to be very, very healing for me, and a good way for me to exercise my voice and not feel like my throat was closing up, and putting this foundation down so that if I have to stand up to another authoritative figure, maybe my throat won't close up next time.